Thanks, mate. Thank you, Sean. Welcome to RMIT. It's great to have everyone here. I'm conscious of being talked about the weather changing. It's not Melbourne if the weather doesn't change, so that's the standard. Let me start also by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we conduct our business, so the people of the Waiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and also, as Sabina did, acknowledge any Indigenous groups that are here today. So on that point, what a fantastic topic. It's an interesting topic. We're talking about the future of work. And Sean, if I had a crystal ball, I'd look at that the graph you put up and said, you're absolutely right. The crystal ball tells me that that's what's safe and not safe. So let's start with a bit of a social experiment. I want you to look to your left or right. Look to your left or right. And think about the person next to you and the job that they're doing right now. If you're a student, let's pretend that's the job that you're studying, wanting to become. How many of those jobs do you think in 20 years will still remain? You're looking at the person next to you. Remember that it's a 50-50 chance. How many people in this room today, the current jobs that you're doing, do you think that job is at risk? The Economist, a couple of months ago, so there's an Oxford paper that talks about more than 50% of the jobs that we do today are at risk of not being here in 20 years' time. So Sean, your 10-year prediction might be fine, but in 20 years, a lot of the jobs that we're doing now will be different. Now, is that a scary thing? Or is it actually quite exciting? To me, it's absolutely exciting, because the reality is the world literally is changing as we see it. As we're looking out the door, at the window, it is changing. So the important thing is, yes, jobs will change. Skills that we need will need to change. And how we acquire those skills will need to change. And that's what I'm going to hopefully talk to you about. And the context of this is probably through a story. Let me take you on a journey through 4 generations of the Ranasinghe family. That's my family. You're looking at my grandfather, my father, myself, and that picture is off. I've got some of my team here today. That's a picture of my team and what they get to see as I'm passionately delivering a conversation. And then my 2 children. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. I've got 2 boys. I've got those 2 boys looking at their future. And I think they're oblivious to the changes that they're facing. So I'm going to talk you through the story of the Ranasinghes and the evolution of work as they've gone through it. Because I can tell you now, the way my grandfather approached study and work is literally, it's completely different to the way my children have to face into their work. And to be fair, everyone in this audience, if it's not yourselves, us, our future generations have to think differently. So let's talk through that, looking into the future of work. What does that look like? So my grandfather in the 1940s, maybe 1950s, left Sri Lanka on a ship. Took 3 months to travel to the UK, and he came back as a surveyor. And that was his speciality. His expertise was to become a surveyor. He left the village that he was from, probably 20 years before that, and came to Colombo to study. So his ticket to further himself and his family was through education. So that's the constant that you'll see through this story. But that speciality, being a surveyor, was the one constant. From the time that he left to the UK in his 40s till the time he retired, and he became a board member and an executive, but his one job was still a surveyor. Now do you think that's what today is about? One job for life? I literally don't know anyone who I started my career at Ford Motor Company, and there were people as I was starting who had been there for 40 years. That's just not the way things happen anymore. There's a number of reasons for this, and we'll explore that today. But the amount of information that we have at hand and the speed of change is causing this. You can't just be a specialist in one area. So this is my father. This is the day that my father left Sri Lanka. So unlike a ship that my grandfather took, my father took a plane. And unlike going to the UK, he actually came to New Zealand and then Australia. This is in the 60s. So I've gone from the 50s to this is the late 60s. My father came to New Zealand and became an engineer, and then came back to Australia and did his master's and qualified, did his postgrad. But again, his speciality was engineering. But importantly, unlike my grandfather, whose depth of experience was only surveying, my father's experience broadened. He used his engineering expertise to do other things. So when he first started, he was in research and development. By the time he retired, he was in procurement. Still using engineering as his core, but he broadened his expertise to do a number of things. And again, he had a number of jobs. He worked for ICI, he worked for the Ford Motor Company, he worked for a number of other organizations that probably didn't have engineering at their core. So Ford and ICI, you can argue that they were engineering organizations. He worked for hotel companies. But the constant was still using engineering, but to broaden his experience to drive or to do a job. So a few jobs, increasing scope, but again, can you see that scenario? Now, the first conversation that we had about my grandfather, that shape of skill or work was described as the I shape. In my father's experience, it's the T shape. And in fact, the T shape is still being used. So Google still talk about hiring for the T shape. I'm being hurried up and I'm way behind. My experience is now called, this is the pie shape. So you can't just have one experience or one skill set or one deep domain. You need to have two. So that if you have an engineering background, now you actually probably need to have business as well or design as well. And with that, you'd have the broadened experience on top of that. So there's many jobs within few domains. So my own experience, I started in science as an undergrad. I did a postgrad in technology. I have done work in digital, in marketing and in IT, but I've worked overseas in the UK and in the States and here, but all applying those two key skills, either in digital, marketing or IT or leadership, but the broadening of the experience is still relevant. And in my scenario, I've had a number of jobs. I'm at RMIT now, a different industry. I was at a bank at ANZ before that. I worked in the UK at Aviva, an insurance company. I also worked in travel. So you can see how you're now having to have a number of deep skills, expertise, and broaden your experience as you go through. So then this begs the question, what does Hesh or Heshantha, my 5-year-old, and Darshan, Dash, my 7-year-old, what does the future look like for them? Do you think one expertise, one subject is enough, one domain? 2? Is that going to be enough? No. The reality is they will need to have many domains, multiple domains as the need arises. So I'll give you an example. I went to the UK in 2006 and I studied, if anyone's doing Prince 2 project management, I studied Prince 2 project management. I went to the UK. It lasted 5 years. By the time I left, we were doing Agile. The half-life for a skill or a domain in my grandfather's era was 30 years. It's now 5. By the time my kids start to go to uni and come out, it'll be less than that. So the amount of reskilling, learning that they've got to do is exponentially higher than what my grandfather had to go through. So they will have many jobs in many domains in a flexible capacity. Over 80% of millennials want flexible opportunities, which means they won't be working for somebody, they'll be working for themselves, reskilling and relearning as the need arises. This is literally different to what my grandfather did. He wanted one job for life. He wants security, stability. My kids will want none of that. So when you're thinking about this and applying this to yourself, where do you want to position yourself? Does your learning stop now? Have you finished? Have you finished your 1 degree? Because you'll be irrelevant in less than, I'd say, 3 to 4 years. Your skill set, that depth will never go away. You will still use that. but you need to continue to broaden and learn and bring in new skills. And that's what RMIT is about. What we're about. I'm the marketing guy. I'm the marketing guy. If I can't put, anyway, we're about getting our students ready for life, not just work. Bear with me, come on. But the old system, what my grandfather went through, was, play, learn, get a job, retire. How beautiful was that? Life was very simple. My poor children, probably playing a bit now, but literally after that it will be job, job, job. And to be fair, we're all working longer. And it's fun. I don't think my parents, they're not looking at retirement as putting up their feet and going on a big cruise. They're reinventing themselves. So the generation now are already thinking about this. So my kids, the concept of retirement probably won't exist, which is, I think, in some ways exciting. Again, RMIT. What we're about, we're a university of technology design enterprise. So again, I'm giving you those disciplines. But the way we apply it and the way I think the future of skill and work will be applied is through real experience, through industry-connected, real-life experiences with a view to continue learning. And that's the real important bit. That bit in the middle, or the bottom I should say, is probably far more important than any domain that you pick up. And so this is what my kids will look like. Their future, their education, the broadening, the sort of horizontal bar. These are the types of things that they will need to have. The ability to learn, enterprise-wide thinking. They've got to think about empathy and communication. My two boys play footy on the weekend, and every now and again the much bigger kid will elbow them. They need to be able to take that. So grit, resilience, critical thinking. These are the sorts of broad skills that they need to have, but they will also need to pick up a lot of skills along the way. So that on the right-hand side is an example. Hopefully they get a degree from RMIT, but then they'll pick up a whole lot of other skills into their list of experiences. Their comb-like shape will have a lot of different experiences. Very conscious of time, I'm going to leave the questions till later and then pass it back to Sean.
Well done.